Okay, very good morning and warm welcome to this session. Good morning, RC Chandigarh. I think the proceedings are being recorded. It is on. So we'll move ahead with our discussion. Dear learners, yesterday we completed the DCE 3, which was short story, writing short stories. During the discussion yesterday, we discussed the block 4, which is the experimental story. And during the discussion, we found out that there is a new trend, there is a new wave of writing, and in short story also, a lot of experiments are being done. Like the introduction of villain in the short story is one such addition. Besides, there is also a trend of kind of putting the plot or deal treatment of the plot slightly different manner than the conventional one. The conventional manner is to have a proper beginning, then the middle, and then the conclusion or the end. But we see that in the experimental story, sometimes there's a very sudden beginning, and then it becomes very intense, and finally the suspense is resolved, and then the whole concept of the story or the whole idea behind the story becomes very vivid or clear. Uh, there is one very important factor which we came to know in the experimental story, that is the importance of the open-ended narratives. We have been talking about the narratives in the various different formats of the short story, that is the detective story and also in the children's story, where we have seen that in detective story it is precisely or definitely the conclusiveness is there, and that means it is a closed-ended conclusion or end. But in children's writing, we found out that it is usually open-ended. That means the children have scope to re-enter into the arena of the short story which they have gone just now, and speak to the characters which is otherwise imaginable or improbable. But in children's story, nothing is improbable; everything becomes probable. Though we have to keep in mind that at the center there is some traces of truth. That means there's some reality around which the entire fiction is woven. And then we also discussed the innovations in the style, the treatment of the characters, and there's a there is a change or in the perception these days that in the story, in the conventional story, it has time and period importance because everything goes into time and period. That means the atmosphere, the environment, or the situation that makes very important impact on the treatment of the story, because the dress have to be according to the environment according to the situation, and the entire treatment has to be like that. So, this can be very vividly seen in the stories which are kind of giving the those come or have the central theme from the historical events, like Mughal period, like ancient Indian civilization. There has been certain cases of short stories which have been very important short stories. They deal with the history, they deal with the past, and the important factor there is that the character speaks the same way. Their narratives are same that was prevalent in that kind of period. So time and period and the uh, situ- situation, the atmosphere and the environment. This is very important. But if we look at the experimental short stories, even there is a tendency to depart from that tradition and deal with the environment or the situation or the atmosphere slightly differently. That means the modern short story writer is trying to make a little comment on the conventional values, and also it portrays the events in slightly a different manner, because today the younger generation sees things differently, whereas the conventional viewpoint about certain issues like values, like social behavior, like language use, it is quite different. Besides, it has also been seen that over the period of time, the language, the terms, the metaphor also changes. So what traditionally was considered to be, a kind of sober, that is no more like that, and what used to be treated as indecent, that is today becoming decent, whether it is in narratives, whether it is in the perception about cultural and social values. So the modern short story writer is trying and is experimenting with all these things, and he is presenting the things in more apt way for the modern or the young reader. This is a very important development. This is something that sometimes the subject is opposed against the plot. That means the protagonist is not properly, or it is seemingly not suiting to the plot. But the modern short story writer wants to establish the subject, and he wants to become anti-plot, anti-hero, and wants to present things in slightly different manner, which challenges the traditional values, the social values, and the social setup, the culture, and so forth. Though the short stories that have been written on experimental pattern are slightly difficult to understand, because their beginning is slightly different, and they also deal with the fantasy in slightly different way. So that means they are, anti-plot. So if one is anti-plot, that means the form of these short story will be different. There might be a very intense statement in the beginning itself, and then the story unfolds. So there are a lot of issues which we discussed yesterday, and I feel that this change is definitely becoming popular, because the younger generation loves to read literature which seemingly challenging the established norms and values. So it is, but at the same time, one cannot say that this is against the norms, against the values. Reason being that present generation like to read such material. One thing which yesterday we discussed, that absurd is becoming plausible. Absurd is made plausible. Usually, in the conventional short story, the absurdity has no place. It is all well settled, and it progresses step by step, and it it it, adheres to the social values, cultural values, and so forth. But if we look at the modern story, which is the experimental story, there the absurd is made plausible. That means it is made understandable. Absurd is usually not understandable. It is confusing. It has dichotomy and so forth. But here we come to a point of understanding where absurd is also made plausible. That means made understandable. That sounds very little tricky at the first instance. But if we go into the whole notion of modern or the experimental short story, that there is no issue, because ultimately the experience of the reader is very important. If the reader experiences has a better experience of the short story, he feels really satisfied and gets intense into and gets along with the short story quite well, then there is no issue. So the logical sequencing, the respect to established social and cultural values, and the use of language in a very decent manner, and so forth. These all things have been challenged. So if we look at particularly, the opening narratives of the experimental short story, then we find that it is quite contrary to the established style or pattern of the conventional short story. So it begins, it has an abrupt beginning, but it gets settled and ultimately deals with the plot in the same manner, though it is anti-plot. Though it anti-plot doesn't mean it is antithesis or anti basis or anti-situation, but it simply say that it has a different order of form. Form we yesterday discussed. It is the structure of the story. So no matter what is the structure, as long as the readers enjoy it, they like it, there's no issue. So I feel like some established authors have also tried on it, like Chekhov has done some experiments. Salman Rushdie has done a great lot in his writings, where he is quite anti-plot and quite anti-hero. And like that, in Indian writings also we find very like Shobha De, she has written quite a lot which is anti-plot and anti-hero. So these are few points that I thought to discuss in the recapitulation. Today, as I mentioned yesterday, we are moving to another very important course, which is DCE, Diploma in Creative Writing in English 04. Let me just remind you that DCE 04 is a course which is nomenclature writing for media, and that is writing for radio and television. So, because these two are the major genres of media, so we will discuss the radio, we will discuss the television. So the first two blocks, of DCE 4, it has four blocks. The first two blocks deal with the writing for radio. That is the radio to be treated or to be understood as medium of mass communication. There are a couple of issues. The title of the course is Writing for Media. So, writing for media means writing for the masses. Masses means the Sarabhara or the Jan, the word which we use in Hindi. So it is these are Sanchar Madhyam. Those are Jan Sanchar Madhyam. Right? If it is media. So Jan Sanchar Madhyam means it's a mass. Mass means it extends its reach to the uh, all the corners, nooks and corners of the country, if it is, or whatever limit there is, the bandwidth is there, which is available. Then till that point, it is meant for all the people. So, Jan Sanchar or the mass media means it is for the entire populace. So we will discuss in the first two blocks the radio, its various functions, its structure, its range of program, and also we will discuss two very important things, the two aspects of radio. Those are the documentary and feature. These are, and we will also slightly discuss the spoken word, which is called usually and popularly known as talks. So we will go to block one, which is to discuss the radio as mass medium, radio as a mass medium, radio as a medium of mass communication. So what does it? Radio as a medium of mass communication. This radio is not radio is media which is having very vast range, and it covers almost all the nooks and corners of the country or the globe, we can say. It is said that radio covers almost 98 point some geographical mass of this earth through its broadcasts or through its transmission. So definitely the radio is a medium of mass communication. Mass communication, I have already explained to you, when it reaches all the categories of people, those who are situated at the hinterlands, the far off places, etc. Since radio has reached to 98 point plus 98%, more than 98% of the earth, so it is definitely a mass medium of communication. As I mentioned to you, there is a very appropriate term for the mass communication, which is Jan Sanchar. So the Jan Sanchar is actually denoting a very appropriate sense that it is for the entire population. So if we go to the very first unit of the radio as a medium of mass communication, which is the block 1 of DCE4, then we see radio. What is radio? What is its potential, and what is its if we look at in the present setup, present government's perspective or present structure in the government, then what is its role, what is its form, and what is its obligations. So because we are talking a lot about the PSB, the public service broadcast. So this is a very important aspect of the radio, because radio is essentially a public service broadcast. It is meant for the welfare of the public, and public represents the entirety of the population. So first of all, we'll see that what radio is, how do we define radio, and what is its potential, what are its potentials. So first of all, let us consider what is radio. Radio is radio. What is radio? Radio is radio, but radio is a medium of mass communication. That means radio has a reach to the entire population, to whatever range it is meant to broadcast. It reaches in all spheres, in all nooks and corners of that particular geographical boundaries. If it is a nation, it reaches all the people of the nation. If it is a FM, so then it has whatever reaches it has, it reaches to all the people. That could mean it is not meant. The programs are the radio not meant for particular community, particular segment of people, or like that. So it is for all. So this element of all makes it the medium of mass communication. Uh, a small statement about radio is if we talk about the potential of the radio. But prior to that, we have to understand what is radio. Radio is a sound medium. Radio is a sound medium. So what it means, radio sound medium? Radio uses the sound only. It doesn't use the visuals. It doesn't use any other, say for example, multimedia or whatever it is. It doesn't use it uses the script as far as production is concerned, but when it reaches the people, it reaches through the medium of sound. So let us say radio is a sound medium. That is the definition. If we look at the history of radio, then the very earlier traces are the Guglielmo Marconi's wireless, which he developed at in around the end of the 18th century, and he worked in the beginning of 20th century also. So in 19th century and 20th century, radio became it got through various stages, and then it developed as an important medium of communication. And later on, it became a medium of mass communication. So as I mentioned to you, radio is a sound medium. That is the first quality or the characteristic of radio. If you go through the history of radio, there has been a lot of changes in its structure, and eventually around 1935, it became established, and India also got four radio stations initially. So those radio stations were situated at Delhi, Madras, and Kolkata, and also in Maharashtra's Pune. A small radio setup was came into being. So I think there is no use into going into history. Let us come to the pragmatic discussion about radio, since we have very little time. We don't have much time, that way to go into the details. So, first of all, as I mentioned to you, radio as a medium of mass communication, because it reaches more than 98% of the population. So that means it is medium of mass communication, we can say. Uh, Mass communication has been, discussed by various media scholars like William Scram and others, and they found it that the waves which travels on the surface uh, and reaches the masses, that means reaches to the people in its entirety. So that is the medium of mass communication. Radio is something which has a lot of role to be played by the modulation. Since it is a sound medium, the importance of the modulation is not undermined in the radio. Modulation is one term, so we will come across certain terms also, like it is a sound medium, mass communication, and also like modulation. So modulation is one art where by the announcer or the person who is making in statements, making the announcements. opening announcements and certain other things. So he utilizes the voice in a slightly different manner than we usually do in our day-to-day behavior. So that is called the modulation, or rather one can say it, the adaptation of sound in consonance with the situation. So if someone is presenting children's program, then he speaks very in a soft tone and hello children, how are you? I hope you enjoyed the rain yesterday, and like that, like that. Whereas if one is talking to the rural farmers, then there's a different kind of address and different kind of style, and there's a undertone and overtone in one's sound also. So all these are very essential feature of radio since it is a sound medium. We will discuss the visuals or the pictures, which are there on the screen that when we discuss the television. So, as I mentioned to you, radio has great potential. Reason being, it is cheaper medium. It is quite cheap to to have the radio, to purchase the radio. It's not very expensive. The maintenance is quite economical. It is available. It is portable. It can be, the more important aspect of radio is that it is very easy to, modify the programs. Radio programs can be modified without any fuss. What one has to do is simply, go to the station and use the appropriate bandwidth band and just start doing it. But as compared to the radio, it is very expensive. It is very typical and time taking as regard the television. So radio is economical. Radio programs can be adapted and changed or replaced quite easily, and new programs, new information can be put as at no delay. That means it's very instant. Radio is very instant medium. Radio reaches more than 98%, as I have been mentioning. Radio is not very costly or expensive. The programs are very easy to record, and if it is recorded properly, there is very little role for editing, though editing takes place as far as the spoken word is concerned. But that is to bring in more quality. But if required, then in a situation where it is where, like in emergency situation, floods, accidents, or natural catastrophes, radio is one which reaches very fast, and then it immediately start broadcasting. So that way we can see radio is definitely having a vast potential because of its reach, because of its adaptation quality, and because of its no economical perspective. And also very important aspect of the radio is that it is very instant. That means it takes hardly any time to put broadcast over radio and also to modify the radio programs. So maybe I'm sure that you will agree with me that radio is almost costing nothing. Even these days, you see everybody is having mobile phones and certain other gadgets, and the radio is already built in these gadgets. So one doesn't even have to buy a separate machine for this, as it used to be the case previously. So we look at the radio as an important medium of mass communication. Then, as I mentioned to you, that its characteristics, its features are like it is a sound medium. Whatever happens with the radio, it only happens through the sound. So we must give a great regard, great respect to sound as far as the radio is concerned. Of course, there is a modulation, there is a addition, editing, there is everything. but principally the words play their role in the radio. Uh, Secondly, I mentioned to you that radio is one which is a very, very useful medium to be experimented with. A lot of experiments can be done with the radio. What are those experiments? Those are like changing the structure of the program, bringing or adding new information to the program, appropriate use of sound and visuals, and the visuals can be in, those are presented through the sound modulation. They do not come like visuals and reality, but through the modulation of sound, all those shades are created in the listener's mind. Discuss the radio vis-a-vis print medium. That way, we always know that radio programs are very easy to rebroadcast, to easy to edit, easy to modify, which is not very similar case with the television and also the print media. We know that newspapers have a fixed periodicity. Radio doesn't have fixed periodicity. We know that programs over the All India Radio or other FM channels are repeated anytime and every time. But it cannot happen with the print medium. How print medium prints the it has what we call is the duration or the periodicity. This periodicity means the newspapers are either published daily, maybe there are midday publications, but those are also publications which only publish in the afternoon. That means those are also daily. Then they are weekly, then they are bi-weekly, fortnightly, monthly, then quarterly, then 6 monthly, then yearly, like that. But this is not the case with radio. In radio, there is a probability of putting the programs at any point of time and modifying the programs without much ado, and also repeating the programs quite often. If, say, the best example is this, like small new programs relating to health, or the like in the corona period we had small capsules programs, and those were cautions against the coronavirus. So those programs were being broadcast, every 5 minutes duration, every 10 minutes duration. That can happen only over the radio, which is very difficult. The problem it is not the case that those cannot be put over television. They cannot. They can be put. The problem is that they cannot be edited so fast as it is edited and modified over the radio. So this is a very important advantage of the radio as compared to print media. As I mentioned, print media or the newspapers, journals, or magazines, they have fixed periodicity. That means they are printed over a certain period, uh, but that is not the case with the radio. Radio is very important because it is the only medium which has like medium wave broadcast, the short wave broadcast, the FM channel broadcast. So these days, of course, FM broadcasts are very popular, and you can those continue throughout the night and so forth. Radio is also now has a lot to do with the technology. There are now digital recordings and digitization in the radio also. All the major radio stations are using the digital archives to play back the music, to play back the numbers, and also to play back certain recordings which have been done. So we know that radio has been one very important factor which has been able to retain the very rich tradition of the Indian classical music, or Hindustani classical music. That radio can take credit because it has for a very long time, kept the tradition and through its broadcast of the classical music programs. Uh, we must also acknowledge the radio. It has very quickly adapted to the technology. Now the entire radio programs are digitized. Those are recorded in through the digitization technique. They are broadcast using the same technique, and there are archives which have the digitized recordings of almost all the programs that have been recorded till now from the inception of the radio, or those were available in the archives of All India Radio. They all have been digitized. So we can say that radio is one such medium of mass communication where there is a lot of opportunity to experiment with it. Now, if we see what are the objectives of the radio is a sound medium. It is very economical. It is very immediate. It is very urgent. It is easy. The radio programs are easy to modify and can be modified at within almost no time. And radio programs can be put out without any delay if there is a need of that kind, like in emergency situation, flood situation, natural calamities, like that, similar other situations. Radio is a very important medium of entertainment. Radio is a very important medium of information, and also it is very important medium of education. So we know that the word which is used sometimes is infotainment. Infotainment, that is to inform, that is to entertain, and that is to educate. So it informs, it entertains, entertain. Information. What is information? We know that there are, in fact, every broadcast is full of information. Every broadcast over radio is full of information. If it's a news feature, it is full of information. It is news, pure information. If it is a documentary, it has a certain hard facts in it, and that is why it is also information. Even if it is a discussion, then it is information. Leaving apart small, chunk that is meant for the sangeet or the music or the modern music or the new numbers. Largely, it is the information, and then it is for entertainment. I do not know how to define the entertainment in radio because we cannot say that only the dramas that are put out over radio or the music programs or lighter tone talks are only the entertainment. I feel that even if it is a very serious educational broadcast, that means the program relates to education, it is also to entertain. Entertaining to entertain and the individuals is very psychological process because one may like to be entertained with music, somebody might not like that. Another person is feels entertained by hearing the running commentary about cricket match, but maybe some people do not like it. But the one who likes it, it is a source of entertainment. Similarly, we also feel very happy by looking at the commercials, the advertisements. When the vehicle runs through a very fast pace and it comes to screeching halt, and then we hear that, oh yes, these are so and so company's tires, then we have an element of entertainment in it because it is It is, as the younger generation likes, it is a challenging point where the vehicle comes to standstill. And it is shown that if it would have moved little further, it could have fallen into a deep gorge. What I'm trying to say is that almost all the programs have their own clientele, their segment of listeners, and those listeners feel very happy with the radio broadcast. So radio is to inform, radio is to entertainment, radio is to commercialize. What is commercialization? Commercialization is particularly with regard to radio. There is a service which is called Vivid Bharati. Vivid Bharati is a commercial service, and the programs are sponsored. All its programs, whether it is news, whether it is feature, whether it is documentary, or whether it is music, whatever programs are put out from the radio, their commercial aspect means those are sponsored by certain corporate houses, certain agencies, or those who want to advertise their products also. So along with the regular programs, there is a small chunk, or we can say small capsule, which is prepared and which is broadcast before that particular program is begins, and sometimes it also takes a break in the middle, and this commercial is broadcast, and that same is at the end. Before closing, the commercial are again given some seconds. So this is the commercial angle of the radio. Very important aspect of radio is the education. We know that radio has been a very important tool of education, and it has facilitated certain major initiatives of the government. Vigyan Varta was one very important series which ran for couple of years. Similarly, we also have school broadcast, particularly for different universities, where teachers used to come. They plan the programs, and then a small broadcasting schedule was dedicated for the teachers program. But now that program has come to an end, and a lot of educational programs. That means the issues relating to education, sometimes the content based discussions or the talks, those are broadcast. So it is also. But if you look at the other side of the broadcast, then every broadcast is an education. If we say it is information, that means even if it is a music program, then we listen to a very acclaimed musician, and then we go into deeper into the lyrics, and then we find those lyrics have a very substance, a very important message. So that message is conveyed through the music, but it is something to be learned from. So it is an educational approach, or it is an instructional approach. Finally, I told you that the essence of radio also includes the public service broadcast. So I have already told you that public service broadcast is means that there are certain programs, there are certain announcements which are made, keeping in view the importance of the reach of the radio. So that is, it is said that the radio has some social responsibility. So if it fulfills, same is like with the industry, which is CSR, the corporate social responsibility. Similarly, radio also has public service broadcast, public service announcement, which is the social obligation of radio towards the community. So under this program, government policies are focused, their pitfalls, their lacunas are pointed out, and plausible solutions are suggested by the experts who participate in the discussions or talks or whatever programs that is broadcast for the public service announcement or the public service broadcast. Radio production is not very complex, we can say. It is quite different from the television and other mediums of mass communication. Usually, we know that today there are high-end recorders. Those are available for the recording, and those recordings can be, through the Wi-Fi or some other media. Those are transmitted to the radio station where those are recorded and digitized. So radio also use these sound techniques quite a lot, and besides there are high-end studios these days. Those studios are having the facilities for digital recordings and also facilities for editing the programs. Besides, there are arrangements for recording the talks. Those are to be delivered by an individual, and there are also facilities where the discussions or paricharcha or samvad such programs takes place. Particularly programs on the current affairs where 3 to 4 persons are in the studios, and there are provisions of 2 to 3 mics. Those are meant for the individuals. There are, one very important aspect of the radio broadcast is the bridge programs. So bridge programs are as good as the teleconferencing programs. So there are people, stationed at different parts of the country or the globe, and particularly when we have like natural calamities, or we have budget presentation, or any other major event like G20 meetings are being held all over the country. So, in order to bring in the views of peoples from all corners of the country, the radio has a arrangement or a system which is called the bridge programs. So, through this program, through the networking at the radio stations, the different individuals or the institutions are approached around the country. Their views are, broadcast either live, or sometimes those are recorded and put out to broadcast slightly later by cross-checking the facts like budget presentation, etc. Because and sometimes there are only, or purely, I should say, the speculative programs, like elections. There are programs which speculate the trends, and then with the help of the experts or the editors or the correspondents uh, of All India Radio or the correspondents for print media, those their views are pro and cons, and critical views are presented over any activity which is of great importance to the nation. So we can see, the radio is one such medium which is a sound medium. So I had a very interesting talk with some announcers who have been newly recruited. So I was interacting with them, and they asked, "Sir, how do we learn, understand radio? How do we understand radio?" So I told them that radio comes by listening. So radio comes by listening, or you understand the radio by listening. They said, no, all of us listen to radio. So I then used a Hindi metaphor, which I said, radio sunne se aata hai. So they didn't understand it. We had 1 hour discussion, and eventually when I was leaving, I said, have you got the definition correctly? They said, no, yes, radio sunne se aata hai. So then I corrected that, no, it is not sunne se. रेडियो सुनने से आता है. Since radio is a sound medium, you have to voice each and every sound with full impetus. Radio, the microphone, which is the only tool with the announcer or the broadcaster, doesn't add anything from its own side. There is no aid of visuals, there are no sites, there are no text, there is no data that can be presented through the camera or through. So there is no camera, there is only microphone, and microphone broadcast what one voices. So if one would like to say kankad, so one can't say kankad. One has to say kankad because only then the that is to say the pebbles. So it is very important that every letter of the radio script is voiced properly and given full impetus, full force to voice it. So this is very important. So that is how we say there is no place for, even though it is now accepted, but usually radio broadcasts used to be very clean, very elegant. So there used to be least stammering, sneezing, coughing, or choking of voice, etc. All these are very efficiently handled by our broadcasters, by our announcers. So these are the few traits of the good radio announcement, as I mentioned. But it happens with the human beings sometimes, and it is now being accepted. At some point of time, these were not expected at all over the radio. Now, finally, we come to the writing for radio. This is very important. Just the key to understanding the radio. When we write for radio, it is the style or it is the format of writing which is quite different from writing for any other medium. Even if it is for radio drama, then the new script is prepared by somebody writes the script for radio drama, then the producer will modify it or edit it and write another script that we will discuss later. Radio uses very simple, plain, and flowing language. There is no place for very complex, very long sentences in the radio because every letter has to be voiced and it has to be sound valued. So that means the words and sentences they should be very clear. Letters, words, and sentences very clearly voiced over radio. So they should also be written with equal elegant. This is very important. So usually there is a space for the small sentences. The complex sentences are avoided over radio, and radio sometimes overlooks the grammatical rules, which are there for the otherwise for the print media, which observes the grammatical rules. Radio sometimes starts. It has a very emphatic start. So it has very one can say a very matured starting. So that might not be in consonance with the grammatical rules, but yes, it helps to catch the audience attention of the audience. Like one can say for example, if one is talking about the cricket match that is being played, then there can be beginning. Uh, uh, Double tongue brings glory to the nation. Double tongue brings glory to the nation. So what is double tongue? So there is a specific language for a specific register. That means for specific purpose, specific activity, specific genre. So double tongue here means double century. So it is not said Indian cricket team scores double century. No, it is not like this. Or Sachin scores double century. Somebody say double ton brings glory to the nation. like that. So there might be little, mm, you know, aggression to the grammatical rules. So the first thing one has to keep in mind, radio uses very simple, very flowing and very clear expression. So that comes only when you don't have very complex sentence structure. The sentences are small, and also there's a clarity of thought. The clarity of thought is very important. Clarity of thought means the topic should be dealt with very clearly. It shouldn't be confusing. One important aspect of radio writing or writing for radio or the writing radio script is there are certain facts and figures. Those can be very easily presented when you have the visual help to present the facts and figures. Like in television programs, some diagrams are drawn and they pinpoint certain things very clearly. But that visual aid is not available with radio. So there is a rule of approximation. There is a rule for approximation. If the budget has been presented with say 2 trillion, 20 million, and then 500,000, and then 384 or 86 or something like it. So usually there is an approximation. One say around 20 million bales of cottons were exported. But if it is in the TV programs, if it is in the television program, then one can put the figures exactly as it is. So in radio, it is a convention that very large figures are approximated, and they are announced in the approximation. But it is not for like say for example, if members of parliaments are elected, members of the state assemblies are elected, like in the elections, their exact figures are given, but those figures are not very long or large figures. Those can be given precisely as they are. But if there are very long figures, particularly with the presentation of budget or certain other, say for example, if it is a census, if it is some survey, where there are large and long figures, those are broadcast in the approximation. Uh, so, so besides this, there are certain writings which are not considered very good writings. Such writings, are where there are a lot of sentences which are put in one uh, sentence by adding a lot of colons and semicolons. Those are very important when those are presented in the print media. But while reading over radio, those have to be short sentences. They cannot be, marked by the semicolons, colons, or whatever it is. So it is very difficult if that kind of script is presented. Then the announcer or the broadcaster feels very inconvenient. Those should be avoided. There should be very clearly, completed small sentences, and then avoid the use of lot of punctuations, lot of complex indication in the sentences. So these are few programs, and then there's a little note on the art of scripting. Radio script is different from the script that is for the television or for the print medium. Writing for radio is different, as I mentioned, from the print medium and from the television medium. Particularly writing radio talk, it has to be a straight talk. Another feature I didn't mention about the radio. Radio is a mass medium, a medium of mass communication. Radio is a sound medium. Thirdly, radio is for one and all. This is the universal principle of radio. Radio is for one and all. That means the radio script is presented in such a way, radio programs are broadcast in such a way that they do seem to be broadcast for one. That means every individual, whosoever is listening to radio programs, feels as if the program is being broadcast for him or her only. But at the same time, it is being broadcast and listened to by millions of people. So what I'm trying to say is that it should very cautiously respect the heterogeneity of the audience, both in terms of its terminology, its usage of words, sentence structure, cultural ethos. So it should avoid making any reference which might hurt a community, a creed, a color, or a race. Very importantly, one must understand that radio is for one and all. That means while the program is a literary magazine, who knows that it is being listened to by a scientist who is having literary interest? If it is a scientific program, any human being, any listener, any citizen can have interest in the science programs or science subject or scientific topic. So one shouldn't think that my program has a theme which is particularly addressed to a particular group of people, but the broadcaster then doesn't cannot imagine as to what is the constitution, or what is the what are the background of his or her listeners. So one should think that radio is for one and all. That means radio must use such diction, such language, such words, such style of presenting the information, that it must address the needs, at the same time respect the social and cultural values in all aspects. So these are so radio this way has a great potential. Radio has a great role to play. Radio is a medium which has a lot to be experimented with, and radio has been the soul saver. It's a SOS in many difficult situations. So we moved ahead with our discussion for this particular session, and then it is the types of program that a radio offers. Radio programs, it has a lot of internal internal structure, and then it has the local programs, regional programs, then there are national programs, then there are external programs, or national broadcast or the external service broadcast. So there is a one complete division which is meant for the external service division, or ESD. So radio programs are having in a common way, we can say it has the regional service, that is for the different regions, where we have the state-wise radio station. It has the national broadcast, which are like current affairs programs of All India Radio, or the national literary magazines. Those are broadcast all over the country, and all the regional radio stations also take that program and broadcast it. So there is a system whereby the certain programs which are of national importance, those are broadcast. Those are through the network of radio stations. There are certain programs which are meant for the external broadcast. Those are meant for the listeners who are residing outside the country. So those are meant and managed by the External Service Division, ESD program service, where a lot of cultural programs, lot of policy broadcasts are made, and a lot of programs are meant for the Indian citizens who are settled abroad. Uh, Such programs are also there, like Pravasi Bharatiya Karyakram. Uh, Besides the radio, also has certain other structure of programs. Say, for example, if there is Delhi radio station, Akashvani Delhi, so then it has news programs, it has current affair programs, it has the radio talks. Then there are documentary and interviews. Then there are certain public service announcements. Say, for example, health and sanitation announcements, conservation of water, uh, like this, or observation of the traffic rules, or we remember in the corona period the importance of masks and hand wash, like this. So these are public service announcements. Those are done without any fee, and those are almost repeated every 5 minutes or 10 minutes, so that more and more people can be sensitized with that particular aspect of social obligation. Then there are certain programs which are for the pure entertainment. So for the pure entertainment, there are radio plays, there are sports programs, there are programs about other special events like fairs and melas, etc. Then there are serialization of novels, or one act play, or like adaptation of certain other works which are presented in the serialized manner. Then there are music programs, both Indian music, classical music, as well as the Western music or the light classical music, etc. There is a film music uh, also. Then there are specific programs which are special audience program, which we call the special audience program. So special audience programs are like radio for youth, which is Yuvavani programs, that is meant for the younger generation. They come and deliver talks. They come and present their talents, about their achievements, and there are discussion about the issues that facing the youth. And also there are certain programs which are for the education, like open learning, so forth, like radio counseling, interactive radio counseling programs. There are certain programs which are for the adult literacy. So all these programs are there. So radio has a very large range of programs, beginning from the national service programs to the information and the entertainment programs. And then there are certain programs which are meant for the special audience groups. Those are like a women's program, health programs, and then there are extension programs, particularly the agricultural service information programs and the health programs. These are for the extension. These are known as extension programs. So if we briefly discuss the role of the radio in the national development, then we can look at the overall structure of the radio programs. And if we look at the structure of the radio programs, that means it has very vast scope for integrating the various developmental aspects, various social aspects, various national obligational aspects. So at the same time, there is a very important broadcast, which is the radio commercial broadcast known as Vivid Bharati. So Vivid Bharati is the service which looks after the sponsorship of the different radio programs, like news, like features, the documentaries, certain other programs which are sponsored by different agencies, different institutions. So that is to bring in about some revenue, though it is not fully enough to support the radio, but some kind of commercial angle is also added to the radio broadcast. So we can say that radio is something which is a very important medium of mass communication. And if you look at its broadcasting, it is highly inclusive, and it has served the mankind in different capacities, particularly like Mayday broadcast. Those are meant to send the cries, send the emergency calls across. The radio has played role in it also. And today, radio is not only a medium for the entertainment; it is important medium of information. These days, the FM broadcasts are very popular, and the FM broadcast is popular and also useful in the sense that it gives the instant information. Some broadcasts are very popular these days, like those broadcasts which gives the information about like traffic jams, like road blockage, or like emergency situation at a particular point. So that way it helps the listeners to avoid those areas which are having the waterlogging, which are having traffic problems, which are having other issues. And at the same time, there is need to bring in calm and peace. Radio can have opportunities to broadcast cross-section views very easily, very quickly. So this way, it helps the society in many different ways, help the mankind in a lot of ways which are quite easy to manage. So, dear listeners, I hope you have got some idea about the radio broadcast and the range of radio broadcast that is there. So, if we have time, and then we will discuss what goes into making of talks, what goes into the drama or radio play, how it is different from the other type of plays or other plays that are broadcast over certain other media, or the plays which are presented in the print media. There's a small discussion on essentials of production techniques. So how do we produce the spoken word? So that means how do we produce the talks? Let me just share with you that amongst all the radio broadcasts, talks is one such genre which is very important. So it is also called the spoken word, because you can do modulation, you can dramatize the voice, you can narrate, you can put the narratives in particular way like that, or you can do mimicry, something. But if one has to deliver a talk which is on a very specific subject or theme, then it is very difficult. It is very, say, seasoned assignment. One has to take it very seriously, because what you are doing, you are writing for ear, writing for ear. That means you are writing for somebody to listen to. You are not writing for somebody to see, watch, or produce in a way that there are other catalysts or devices. So it is only one device with which it will be understood, that is ear. So that means you must catch the ear of the audience, of the listener. So what it should be like, it has to be, focusing and also recentering. So that radio talks or the spoken word that is broadcast over radio has to be focusing and recentering. Only then you can catch the ear of the listener. So catching the ear of the listener doesn't mean physically catching. That means you are catching the attention of the listener through his hearing, through his or her ear. Second, very important, it has to be self-evaluation. What is self-evaluation? That means what one broadcast, one must feel that yes, I have done the justice. If one is not confident enough that he or she will be able to uh, catch the attention of the listener, then perhaps one should desist from delivering the spoken word or the talks. Another important aspect of the spoken word or the talk is its language. You know what the language should be like. It cannot be very complex, and it cannot be in a very hurried tone. Very hurried tone. It is not desired over radio. The language should be, or the speech should be very normal. The sounds should be very uh, normal. It shouldn't sound uh, hurry tone in it. It shouldn't be too lenient, too slow. Then there has to be, the problem with the radio talks are that when it is written by immature contributors, it uses the very formal style of language. But whereas radio is the medium which is very very informal, it is very intimate medium. As I mentioned, radio is for one and all. It is very intimate. So there has to be informal words, like जैसा कि हम सब जानते हैं, भारत में नाभिकीय ऊर्जा पर काफ़ी प्रगति हुई है, और फिर भी हमें यह जानकर प्रसन्नता होगी कि सरकार ने इस दिशा में एक और आयोग का गठन किया है, ताकि हमारी नाभिकीय ऊर्जा की जो आवश्यकताएं हैं उन्हें हम शीघ्र से शीघ्र पूरा कर सकें। आपको यह जानकर भी हैरानी होगी कि अब तक केवल भारत ही एक ऐसा देश है जिसने नाभिकीय ऊर्जा पर न केवल एक स्वतंत्र मंत्रालय की स्थापना की है, अपितु राष्ट्रीय आयोग की स्थापना कर उसने इस दिशा में इस विषय की महत्ता को और उजागर किया है। बहुत सारे देश इस दिशा में अभी उतनी अच्छी पहल नहीं कर पाए हैं, इसलिए भारत उन देशों के लिए एक मॉडल भी साबित हो सकता है। हमें गर्व करना होगा कि हमारे देश के बुद्धिजीवी वर्ग और राजनीतिक चिंतकों ने इस महत्वपूर्ण विषय को आशातीत महत्व दिया है। Whatever talk I delivered, it has very small sentences. It has very normal speed, and also the tone is very very intimate. So we all know the Khushwant Singh, we all know the Amin Sayani, we all know very Rini Simon. These are the celebrity broadcasters, and if we can re-listen to them, then we will find what should be the tone, what should be the speech, what should be the set of words that is used in the over the radio broadcasts. We know like Jaidev Singh, who is the radio commentator, Rajdev Singh, the cricket commentator. And sometimes, he was using his tone in such a way that almost the entire picture of the game would come alive in the running commentary when those were presented over All India Radio. So, such use of words, such speed, which is catching the ear of the listener, is very important. Then there has to be, simple sentences. Sentences cannot be very complex. This is an art of writing for radio, that even the complex concepts can be presented in the simple and plain voice. Very interestingly, the radio sentences are not complete. One doesn't use the word hai, nahi hoga. Radio, we do not say India is having the challenge to meet its energy demands in the next century. Then it is not necessary to complete the sentence, because in radio broadcast, what is important is to put across the message. So there are definitely incomplete sentences, particularly in Hindi and Indian languages. We do not say भारत को अगली शताब्दी की ऊर्जा की आवश्यकता को पूरा करना ही होगा, पूरा करना है. So this है होगा may not be there. पूरा करना आवश्यक है, पूरा करना निहित होगा, something like it. So there are also dialogue and character. Sometimes in plain speak also means plain talk also, straight spoken words also. We bring in a small dialogue. Just for example, perhaps you might have seen it at this particular place, that there are no danger posts, despite the fact that the river is overflowing. Have you, like this? So, have you means you are putting a question, so that means you are adding a small dialogic tone to it. So, that is the format of the radio script. Uh, the narration is very important over radio. It has to be very straight, very fluent. The person who is a broadcaster should be well acquainted with the language and the content. So, usually, when we hear very important talks, the broadcaster or the person who delivers the talk go through the script couple of times before putting it over the radio or putting it over the mic for public consumption. There are certain set of rules for the radio narration. It has to be very straight, very formal, and also using the right kind of tone. Then there is a role for the sound sound effects. This is particularly with the narrations which are having something to be presented or to be broadcast in certain situations. So, for example, if uh, there is a narration about the marine life, marine animals, then there may be sounds of bubbles, sounds of some such effects which are giving an impression as if there are fishes, there are variety of marine life which is there in the background. And so also sound effects are also one such tool which describes many things. If we're talking about marine life, then if there are sound effects from the marine setup, then that will add to the narrations, and it will be more effective. Perhaps one would be more interested to listen to that. Sometimes, like if someone is having an interview with some celebrity or classical singer, then there are small background music that keeps on running all through the conversation. So that is also meant to make the program interesting, and also to give impression that this discussion is about the music person or music personality, or discussion is about music in which a celebrity artist or singer is taking is also a part of the interview. So maybe if we have ample time, we will discuss the art of script writing and also some general notes about the writing for radio. So if we talk about the general notes, or what we call ideal writing or ideal script for radio broadcast, then we can say that the object, the purpose of having scripts for the radio programs uh, is that when these are broadcast over microphone or over the All India Radio or any other radio, then if it is scripted well, then there is no place for wavering from the actual course of contents which is to be broadcast, which is to be presented. Because sometimes there are also some sounds which are coming, which are there. They are they are part of the script. So in radio scripting, the space has to be provided for them. For example, if there is an interview in between, one interviewer is speaking to a acclaimed singer, then they are talking about some rag, you know, that this particular raga is presented at this particular point of day or night or in the morning or in the evening or late night or whatever it is. Then you will say, okay, let us listen to a small clip. So then that small clip is added into the broadcast. So that brings a lot of liveliness to the program. So there has to be a mix. Radio script also allows a mix of uh, various components, various types of material to be woven into script. So there has to be proper research because one cannot write proper or ideal radio scripts without researching, without making studies. So radio talks are results of a lot of hard work, and though they are written in very simple and plain language, yet they are very effectively written. Narration is an important aspect of radio broadcast. Uh, it brings an exposition, it reinforces, and also it sometimes makes very important observations on certain issues which are at the center stage of the talk or the spoken word. Narrations are maybe sometimes we can say that all of us do this thing. Sometimes yeah, certain type of people do this kind of thing, and sometimes we can say you all must have listened to the running commentary where so and so has been making the commentary very effectively, lively, and also in an engrossed manner. That means there is no set rules for the first person, second person, or third person. All this depends upon the presentation style and talk. So we know that there's a lot to talk about radio. That is my area. In fact, having worked in the radio for over a decade, so we can talk a lot about it. But we'll do that when we have more time. Uh, so if we come to the last point of uh, this point of discussion, which is the uh, radio as a medium of mass communication, then we also know that the radio talks presents a typical style of profile uh, of the theme or the topic or the situation. So, it presents the situation in a very attractive manner, in a very clear manner, and also it has a mix of established values, established facts and figures, as well as the contemporary uh, uh, or contemporariness to the established topic or themes. So it is content dense. That means there's a lot of density of contents. That means there's a lot of remixed information which has to be brought into the talks over radio with a lot of clarity and attractiveness. Say, for example, I will give one example. If someone is talking about the budget which is being presented, then there has to be a lot from the previous budgets, but then one should also focus on the present budget, which is having changed priorities from the previous years. So that means there has to be some traces of information from the previous budgets. There has to be focus on the areas in which present budget is focusing, and then there has to be focus on the challenges or the budget deficit which is going to affect the present budget or the overall budget of the country in the coming year. So that means it is content dense. There is a lot of density of contents of information, but how it is presented, how it is clearly stated, that is an art with the art of the person who presents radio talk. Again, I would say that the techniques with which it can all be done is to put the views clearly, put the views informally. Uh, if you take the formal course of explanation, that means if you use the formal structure of language, simply putting it like this, then that doesn't help. It has to be informal, as all of us know, as it has already been known. Most of the people are aware of it like this. So it has to be an informal style. We cannot put the radio talk with the dense contents when it is very complex and in the very formal manner. And it has to be self-explanatory. This is very important. In television or in the audiovisual medium, we know that there is a scope for explaining the things through visuals. So, for example, if someone says in the television program, well, you are aware about the dangers of walking in the middle of the road. So, when on one account it is being narrated, at the same time the visual is showing somebody who got hit by walking in the middle of the road by a running vehicle. So then there is no need to explain what is the result of it. It means the visual itself substantiates that. But in radio, it doesn't happen. In radio, we cannot say walking. You know the results of walking in the middle of the road. What results? You see, you will not be able to substantiate it. You have to say सड़क के बीचों बीच चलने से भारी वाहनों द्वारा दुर्घटनाएं हो सकती हैं और हमें शारीरिक नुकसान पहुंच सकता है. ये हमें we have to tell, we have to narrate all this. So it is to be self-explanatory because there is no other substantiating agency for us to substantiate our statement or our narration or our deliverance of the content. Then you see, very importantly, it has to be target specific, target oriented. If we are broadcasting for children, then we cannot use the language which is meant for the adults. So target specific or target audience means if it is for the rural women, then the program tone and tenor of the program has to be like if you are talking to the rural women. If it is for the urban women, then the tone like बहनों आज हम अचार कैसे डालें इस पर बात करेंगे. आप सबने अपने अपने घरों में अचार बहुत बार बना रखे होंगे, लेकिन अगर हम इसको एक व्यापक पैमाने पर बनाना चाहें तो क्या करें. Similarly, if it is a talk for working women, then you can say, well, all of us are constrained in our work schedules, so we have challenges. We have challenges to take care of our children and also to manage our houses. Let us discuss few tips how we can effectively take care of our households. As well, we can move out and take outside assignments to to have some financial gain for running our families smoothly. So like that, you have to have a tone and tinge in the language which refers to that particular type of audience. If it is for the young people, then you have to begin, hello, buddies, how are you, like this. So that is very important, and perhaps all of us know about it, how to address a particular community, particular group of audience through our radio broadcast. So with this, I will come to an end, to the conclusion of our discussion. How do we present a profile? Uh, how do we know through our through radio talks profile is presented? That means our talk should present this situation as it should create an image in our minds, because that is the radio can do. Radio can only do, it can only create an image. It cannot create the visuals. It can create an image. So that image has to be created with the maturity of the talk, or with the person who is delivering the talk. Uh, so with this, perhaps I would like to conclude, and I invite our learners, if they have any point to discuss. Maybe the more we speak about the qualities of radio, the more scope we get to expand our discussion. So at some point of time, I think we have to conclude it by saying that radio talks are very important. They present a profile of the situation of a person, of a celebrity. And the radio language of the radio talks has to be very clear, informal, and self-explanatory. They are the basic requirements of the radio talk. And also it has to have scope for incorporation of music when we are interviewing some personality who is associated with music, or if you are interviewing somebody who is associated with sports, then there has to be scope for bringing in some quick moments from the sports highlights and like that. So I conclude. We have another session at 2:15 p.m. today, and if there is any question, if there is any thing to share by our listeners, they're welcome to come for the discussion.
Sir, may I, sir? Can you hear me now, sir?
Yeah, very clearly.
Okay. Okay, sir. My point for today's this radio talk is that nowadays it is more of information interspersed with entertainment,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah,
With the advent of this FM radios and many channels available, earlier it used to be two, three, four channels only, and we could orient our life knowing the timings that 11 o'clock will be this program, 2:30 will be this, and had a personal, kind of. Rapport with the presenters, and accordingly we used to enjoy it in that manner.
true.
Nowadays it is basically the entertainment part. You switch over channels, and wherever there is some talk, and the talk also has to be very brief, and within a very very short span of time we have to convey our meaning regarding, say, traffic congestion or some health advisory or some kind of stuff that is nowadays conveyed, because the medium, very many mediums of WhatsApp etc are available. The radio has got its historical relevance more than what it used to be then in the earlier times. That's it.
No, I do agree and endorse what you said, very rightly said. What I would like to add to it is that even though the primarily the younger generation is now more adapted into the informational and entertainment part of it, but if you look at the larger role of the radio as a public service broadcast, or the medium for public service broadcast, it is one of the quickest and effective medium. it has been able to re-establish, rather I should say, its importance during the Corona period, when it was very difficult for the television or for the audio video medium to bring in immediate information. So radio has once again established that in times of distress, in times of emergency, this is the best option. I do agree that at certain point of time there were like Binaka program, like Vivid Bharati program. Amin Sayani was one such personality to whom everybody used to look for the broadcast.
Vivid Bharti.
Huh?
Vivid Bharti by Amin Siani.
Amin Sayani.
Yeah.
So there were people, who were very, popular. But let me just tell you that despite the fact that today there are other mediums you have also mentioned, like WhatsApp, radio, and a lot of social interaction media are there. Yet radio has a very important role, particularly as a medium of the public service broadcast. A lot of issues are there which needs attention without much financial gain to it. So those issues are being yet taken by the medium under the public service broadcast. And Prasar Bharati is again reinforcing to all the broadcasting media, which is both the radio and the TV mediums, to have a specific concerns and consideration for public service broadcast. So this it is being made as a mandatory obligation to these. I am sure that despite the range and variety of the social media which is there, the concern for the national security, national service that lies with the radio broadcast is still of paramount importance. We hope that it does well, it progresses. So, but your observations are, like you mentioned, about the historical role which is played by the radio, particularly in the freedom struggle and on many other counts. That is praiseworthy, and we have a very golden period of a golden history of radio broadcast. Yes, of course. Thank
Thank you,
you.
sir. Thank you, sir.
So with this, I take a break, and we will meet at 2:15 again. Thank you very much.